Hello, everyone. Welcome again to another CanXida webinar. A really important topic here, something to hopefully give you perspective if you've been ill for a long time or experiencing symptoms for a long time. It's really important to know what to expect in terms of a healing timeline and what that timeline can look like, and so that you don't get frustrated early on and those sorts of things, and that you just have realistic expectations. So we'll just jump right into this. First of all, the definition of chronic illness. According to the Centers for Disease Control, a chronic illness is a condition that persists for 1 year or more. And so acute diseases uh, would be something that is relatively short-lived and typically they'll resolve on their own or with just supportive measures. Typically, we might think of an acute illness as like an infection that we get, flu virus or something like that. We can have what are called subacute conditions where, maybe let's say you get an infection and something like Epstein-Barr virus, which causes mono, and say, you know, you have the acute illness of that, but people can be sick for 2, 3 months sometimes and have severe fatigue and things after that. And so I would call that like a subacute kind of situation usually. But once you get longer than that, especially a year, you're kind of in the chronic illness or chronic dysfunction kind of time frame. And this can go on for years and sometimes decades, depending on what's going on and why and all those sorts of things. I've worked with people who've had illnesses for 30 years. The causes of chronic illness, well, there are definitely some common considerations, but I guess the one thing I want to point out here is that there's rarely one thing. If there was one thing, then chronic illness wouldn't be such an epidemic, really, that it is, at least like in the United States where I'm at. It's multifactorial typically. And so there, there will oftentimes in chronic illness be, some primary driving factors, and then there will be some body systems that are dysfunctional or dysregulated that the body really needs to help maintain wellness and to heal. So, for example, the HPA axis, which is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, it's like what you would think of as your adrenals, your adrenal system. That has a lot to do with regulating stress response, blood sugar, and the immune system and things. So you can imagine if that system is kind of dysregulated, that's going to make your ability to heal more difficult, and it can make symptoms worse of a chronic illness. So just using that as an example of a body system, and it can be many other types of body systems that, when dysregulated, contribute to chronic illness. Some things I just want to mention that, and this is not at all an exhaustive list, but some common things that I'll think about when someone's got a chronic illness and try to pinpoint if I think any of these are going on. Um, that would be pathogens. So it could be gut pathogens meaning like microbes that are infectious. There's things like Lyme disease, Epstein-Barr virus, I mentioned, Candida, herpes simplex virus, lots of other types of pathogens, right? But also just considering healthy microbes. In the digestive tract, there's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Those can just be non-pathogen, relatively healthy microbes, and they could just get overgrown, and then that in itself can create an issue. So just thinking about that is one of the places I'll think about. I'll think about toxins, meaning endogenous things that your body makes. It makes toxins and has to get rid of them. And then there's external toxins, like a lot. So I'll think of toxic burden, if you will. Think about how is the liver and the body detoxifying. Are there any issues in those areas that we can decrease toxins or increase? Mold is always a consideration depending on where the person lives and the type of work environments they have and stuff. Autoimmunity, commonly considering autoimmune conditions as well and testing for that, and considering nutrient status. Your nutrient status, depending on what it is, will determine immune function, detoxification abilities, balancing oxidative stress, all kinds of things. So those are just some of the areas that I might think about as being contributing or causative factors. There are some common misconceptions with healing from chronic illness. Thinking that there's a quick fix for a long-standing chronic illness, that's just not the case in my experience. thinking that there's a one size fits all for Candida specifically, Candida being a chronic illness kind of situation many times, thinking that there's just here's the same thing that everybody with Candida should do, sort of thing. There's definitely guidelines and protocol which we've put together here at CanXida, but there's still individuality, and so that's important to remember. People often underestimate the complexity of chronic illness, thinking that it's just like one cause, one pill, one fix kind of thing. It's very complex oftentimes. And people oftentimes want that quick fix and ignore things like the impacts of lifestyle changes and diet. Another thing that commonly happens, and especially like in the conventional medical world, oftentimes the thinking is very symptom focused rather than the root causes. And there are some sorts of root causes that the conventional medical world can perceive and do things about. But in chronic illness, conventional medicine just doesn't work very well. And so what we see in that is mainly because of the thinking, the way that the paradigm of thought is in the conventional medical world doesn't really work for chronic illnesses because of their complexity, and that it's largely a body systems focused approach that you need. You need to strengthen weakened body systems and try to support the natural healing mechanisms of the body, because there's not just like a bacteria that you can kill, or even in like the case of chronic candida, it's like you can't just try to kill the candida. There's a lot of reasons that happened in the first place, and so it's a complex situation, and we can't really focus on the symptoms. We need to focus on how the body heals itself and the root causes. Following the latest trends in healthcare, yeah, there's the things that have always worked will still work in 50 years from now and 100 years from now, is how I would say that. There's always advances in different areas of medicine, but um, you know, following the latest trend often doesn't help in the way that tried and true approaches do. I already mentioned, one supplement dietary change isn't going to be enough to recover, most likely. It wasn't one thing that got you into that situation, and feeling like that if it's a slow process, that, kind of losing hope that you're not going to feel better at all. So let's talk about just candida, chronic candida issues. There's different ways that candida can cause chronic illness and symptoms that go on for years and years and years. So the candida is an issue, but also just remembering like why is the candida there in the first place? How did it get the chance to grow and be in the situation that it is, where it's kind of overgrown, if you will. So one of the main things is that candida causes inflammation in the gut, and it causes intestinal permeability, and that is a primary driver behind many types of chronic diseases, such as autoimmune diseases. I've talked about this many times in other videos, so I won't go into a lot of detail there, but that's one of the main reasons that you can get a lot of issues in chronic illness with candida overgrowth. And chronic candida can lead to recurring infections at multiple sites in the body. Yes, so candida as an organism is kind of incredible. It can eat any sort of carbon source that it wants for food. It doesn't have to just be glucose. So it can kind of mold itself to whatever food is available in the environment, and it can survive in virtually any space in the human body, skin or any other space. Nutrient deficiencies, yeah, candida will contribute to nutrient deficiencies over time, and absolutely can impact your mental health. I mean, whether you're dealing with pain from it, or you're having neural inflammation, brain fog, all those sorts of things can impact the chemistry of your brain, and also impact your mental health, just from the fact of dealing with chronic illness for so long, right? This is a slide that I'm just putting in here that I've had in other presentations to just remind you of what can cause the candida overgrowth. Other things besides this, but just some of the main things to consider, because if these things can cumulatively put you in the situation to have candida overgrowth, these are also the same things that need to be considered and addressed when you're putting together an individualized protocol. So sleep may not be an issue for everybody, but if sleep's an issue, you have to deal with it, because that causes a whole host of issues with inflammation in the immune system, for example. So just that as an example. So everything here may not be an issue, but if you're on a proton pump inhibitor, you likely need to do some work with a practitioner to get off of that and heal your digestive tract and deal with the acid reflux or wherever you're on it from more of a healing perspective than a suppressive one. Just a couple of examples there. You always want to consider those places that can get you into the situation to help get you out as well and prevent recurrence. Realistic expectations, so important when you're dealing with chronic illness. A general concept is that the longer the illness has been present, the longer it will take for healing. It doesn't mean if you've been sick for 5 years that it takes 5 years to get well, but it just means that if you've been sick for 5, 10 years or more, you're not going to be better in 2 or 3 months. You should be feeling improvement, but and I'll get to that. But you can't expect that you're just going to have the whole situation resolved. Part of this is that as the longer chronic illness has gone on, you've sort of got more of a depletion of the vitality of the body systems that are affected in your chronic illness. So you've potentially got, I mentioned the HPA axis dysfunction. Well, that might be even more dysregulated and take more work to get it back into balance. Nutrient depletions from your particular situation, such as Candida, those are going to be worse the longer it's been going on, right? So all of these things just take longer to come back into balance and for your body to heal. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to feel improvements quickly. If you're doing the right things, there should be changes relatively quickly, and you should see that yes, I am doing better now than I was 2 months ago, for example. Low and slow is a good motto to have. You want to use approaches that are relatively gentle, that are aimed at the causes of your candida overgrowth, and take a like slow and steady approach. So if you're getting 10% improvement each month, let's say like in a month after starting your candida protocol, you're 10% better than you were. Well, yes, you wish you were more, and sometimes that 10%'s like you have to actually like look at all of the symptoms that you have and things like, oh, you might not even think you're that much better. Like, okay, well, some of those things are a little better. 10%'s not a lot, but what if that continues? And then in 2 months you're 10% more better, and in 3 months you're 30% more better, right? So you're improving steadily, and by the time you get to 10 months into the protocol, maybe you're like almost all the way there, right? So just to like use that as an example of kind of giving yourself an appropriate timeline. And things are up and down. Sometimes a month will go by and you've had a big jump in improvement, and sometimes it's not as much as you wanted, but sticking with it is really important in chronic illness care. You can't just start and then see improvement and decide you're going to stop, and you can't start and not see the improvement that you want and get discouraged and stop. You have to kind of stick with the plan as long as it's a good plan, right? And just to mention that chronic illness treatment really is as much art as it is science. And so getting an objective perspective is important. And by that, I mean somebody who's trained in working with chronic illness. That objective perspective and professional experience is typically needed. I don't think it's a very common thing that somebody digs themselves out of a chronic illness situation only on their own with, doing internet research and stuff. People get a long way, but in my experience, there's usually at least some places where people get hung up and they still need an objective perspective. So keeping that in mind. And you can't make your body heal faster than it wants to. There's no pill or medication or procedure, anything that can make your body heal. Only your body can heal. And so all we're trying to do as naturopathic doctors and natural health providers is to support your body's natural healing mechanisms, because that's all that can heal. So let's facilitate that, remove obstacles, things that are in the way. But at the end of the day, your body will only heal as fast as it can. And so that's important to remember, that it may just go slower than you want it to. And you can influence this, but you can't control it. So being patient and grateful for the improvements you do have. Just an example here that sometimes a visual kind of helps. Healing from an illness is like fixing up an old abandoned house. When a home has been empty and neglected for a long time, it can't be made new again overnight. It takes time to clean it up, repair the walls, and make everything work properly. And so that's just kind of an analogy that might also help for you to kind of put this in perspective. Okay, how does the body heal? There are some body systems, some particular aspects of the body that are very important for the healing process to take place, and so these are a few that I typically think of. So inflammation resolution, pretty much any chronic illness that you think of, including Candida, Candida overgrowth, there's inflammation. And so the inflammation needs to be resolved. And your body has mechanisms to do that. And the triggers for the inflammation need to be removed. So that's an important thing to consider, resolving inflammation. And then closely tied to that is redox balance. Redox stands for reduction and oxidation. It's those are chemical terms. It's what you might think of as like antioxidants and oxidative stress. And so there's typically oxidative stress that causes inflammation. They kind of go in hand, but they are slightly different things. But oxidative balance is really important as well for your body to be able to heal and for you to feel better. Definitely, in order to feel better, because you'll have a lot of symptoms if you have a lot of oxidative stress. You want to think from a body systems approach. How do we strengthen weakened or dysfunctioning systems? I mentioned the HPA axis. You think about the gut. If there are certain aspects of body functioning that are clearly dysfunctional or weakened, if you will, not working properly, those are important to support in order for total wellness to ensue. And fundamentally, what we're talking about with chronic illness is your body has to be able to adapt adequately to the system's stressors. So an organism like Candida can itself be a major stressor, and your body just can't adapt to it. The immune system can't adapt to it. But there can be lots of other systems that aren't able to adapt to the stressors. Maybe there's like a lot of external toxins around. Maybe you're really emotionally stressed. Like lots of things can ultimately be perceived as stressors by your body. Your body has to adapt. So decreasing stressors and then increasing resiliency is really kind of how the body heals ultimately. Just going to throw in the naturopathic principles. These are the principles of naturopathic medicine. As named here in the United States, naturopathic doctors and naturopaths are different in different places in the world, in different countries and things. So I'm just speaking here from as a naturopathic doctor in the United States. These are our principles. First, do no harm, the healing power of nature, treat the causes, treat the whole person, doctors, teacher, and prevention. And so you as an individual, I think that this is helpful to see these because you can just put some of this into place for yourself and ask like, am I really like treating the whole person here, like my whole self, or am I paying attention to only one thing? Like I have Candida and I'm just going to take I'm going to take some antimicrobial, antifungal herbs and hope that that takes care of the situation, instead of looking at the whole picture. And also, the therapeutic order of naturopathic medicine is fabulous. This is also, again, here in the United States. And the therapeutic order is a really wonderful kind of an algorithm. So one of my mentors would call it a low force algorithm. And put in the pyramid form like this, you start at the bottom, right? The foundation of the pyramid. And so consider the determinants for health. Establish the foundational aspects that your body requires to be well, right? So some of these things might be like proper hydration and clean water, right? Nutrition, on all the dietary factors that are important, right? Social connection and community, movement, right? Potentially, you might say like a spiritual component, a connection to a higher power. That's that sort of concept, right? Whatever that is for you. All of those things are really foundational determinants of health, requirements or conditions for health, you might say, for a human being. And also in this, removing obstacles to cure. That's not listed in this, but it's typically talked about here in my profession. And so we're removing obstacles. And a lot of times the conditions for health themselves, if they're not in place, that's an obstacle, right? So it's kind of the other way of viewing it. So consider, what are the obstacles to me really getting well right now? The more you can remove obstacles and put in determinants of health, the faster your healing journey is going to go. Stimulate self-healing, and support and restore weakened systems. So those are the things I was talking about. I'm just putting this in here because I think that it's kind of a nice illustration and way to understand where we need to be thinking when we're trying to actually facilitate healing and not suppress symptoms. And you'll see at the top of the pyramid is suppressing pathology. Just under that is synthetic symptom control, and then even natural symptom control. And I would argue it doesn't matter if it's natural or synthetic, like that could just be one step. It's symptom control. All of these other things below symptom control are what we need to actually do in order to support healing. So just think about this for yourself. And I think that you'll find that there are things that you can probably do that you haven't been doing, and it will help speed up your journey. I can promise that. And one size doesn't fit all. Okay, so so if you look at the CanXida protocol for Candida, I would say yes, everybody will do well to follow that protocol, but there are going to be individual aspects that also need to be addressed that aren't within that. Does everybody need to practice mindful meditation? No. For some people, is it really beneficial? Absolutely. So just, consider other aspects that for you individually, where are places that are out of balance and that I need to pay attention to for myself. Humans are immensely complex organisms, and ultimately, this last point just speaks to essentially that you can't just do one thing. A simple system, so systems dynamics is a whole field of a professional field, and it applies to, it really looks at complex systems. A complex system could be social structure, could be political, socioeconomic. The human organism, right, is a complex structure in and of itself. And so in simple systems, it'll be something like the faucet is on and the water is too warm. So uh, I turn up the cold side of the faucet and the water gets cooler and it's not as hot. Or I turn down the hot um, and it's less hot, right? And so it's a simple system and there's a simple solution, right? It's just like I do this, this happens. Complex systems do not work that way. The complex systems, you can't just put one input in and get a predictable outcome. You can say it will impact this one aspect of the system, but in a totality of the system, though, you can't predict all of the possible influences and outcomes. So the way that you deal with a complex system is very different. And this is where conventional medicine really gets into trouble with chronic illness, is because they're using simple systems thinking. They're treating the body like a simple system and saying, oh, you've got high blood pressure. I give you this medication to make your blood pressure go down. But that's treating the body like a simple system, whereas a complex systems approach would be more of what I'm talking about, where it's as holistic of thinking as possible, so that you can get a general strengthening of the system and not influence one piece of the system that influences then other aspects in ways that you don't want. Okay, the Candida recovery trajectory. This is kind of true for any chronic illness, but we'll just focus on Candida here. There can be quick recovery, there can be partial recovery, there can be like almost recovered, and then there can be people that don't recover. And there's different reasons that each of these things can happen, right? But quick recovery is usually, if you kind of realize what's going on earlier on, you take action early on because you have an awareness that there's something going on. And so, you sort of were primed potentially for candida overgrowth. You got a course of antibiotics, and then you start having symptoms, and you change your diet, and you take like CanXida remove, let's say, to cleanse the candida and other bacteria in your gut. Maybe you take the restore formula to get some probiotics in there, and you recover quickly. A partial recovery is Potentially where there's an improvement and then like a relapse, and kind of a flopping back and forth. And but ultimately, like people that partially recover, they still realize there's a problem somewhat early on, most likely, at least within the first year, and they take action on it. Maybe they falter, but they still sort of stick with it, and ultimately they get to recovery. Um, Almost recovered is like kind of like the previous group, except they just never really are able to get uh, they're never able really to stick with the changes that need to happen. If someone's almost recovered, it's potentially a behavioral type of issue where they just can't stick to the program. And it could be for different reasons. Right here we have alcoholism and drug addiction listed. It could just be like, could be dietary, right? There's people have issues with food addictions um, and binging and issues with sugar, which is addictive. And so those are just like other options. There can be internal physiologic things as well that can, if not caught, can make it so that people just never can quite like they're sort of like almost always almost there. And then this last group is just never recovered, and that would only be if you just never stuck to the plan, or thinking there was a quick fix, and um, just kind of the problem just keeps going on, and might do little things here and there to try to like address the symptoms and just make it through, but it's not recovery, right? And with this almost recovered group, also just say like it, it's not that any of these it's not possible to recover. It's just um, we're talking about like like full recovery, like in the almost recovered group. There, it's just like you're almost there. There's just some obstacle potentially left in the way, but never recovered is just not the either the not the right approach is being used, or there's just no sticking with it essentially. And so yeah, you can't expect recovery to happen in that. Some reasons that people may not fully recover. These are just a list of some things. I'm not going to read all of these things on the slide. If you've been watching my webinars long, I don't do that. But just having it here, you can pause and read these things. But there can be misdiagnosis if Candida, for example, can overgrowth can look like a lot of other things. So making sure that you actually know what's going on, which isn't reason to get a professional objective perspective, right? I have a lot of people who come to me and are convinced they have Candida, and we do a stool test, and no, there's no Candida. You've got bacterial dysbiosis. You've got this other organism there, a parasite or something. But don't get convinced without good evidence that it's Candida. It might be, but you need to figure that out, right? So get the right diagnosis. Maybe you start a treatment plan, but you don't want to make the investment to have follow-up care. That is not uncommon to lose people to follow-up. There's financial investment. Maybe there's a little bit of improvement early on, and people just decide that, okay, I'm just gonna like try to do this on my own, and that can lead to not having full recovery because it's not a quick process typically for folks. Poor response to the first treatment, talked about that. That's kind of a one of belief that you can get better and hope and that sort of thing. Giving up, yes. Thinking one solution is enough, talked about that. Continued exposure to risk factors, kind of talked about that as well, right? All of those things that can put you in the situation to get Candida overgrowth. From that one slide, you need to address those things if any of those are present. There can be other reasons too, but those are clear risk factors for Candida. And then there can be other health conditions. There can be health conditions that impact your immune system and different things. So that also kind of ties into the appropriate diagnosis. And also, I will say a good thing that I have always remembered as a practitioner since early on in my practice is that there's no rule that says there only has to be one thing going on. So you can have Candida overgrowth, and you can also have an autoimmune condition, for example, right? And there can be another health condition. There can be different things going on, and a lot of times in chronic illness there are, and that's why it can be complex. So just remember that as well, that it may not just be one diagnosis. Another thing I want to mention in the Candida recovery trajectory of things, I mean, really, if you just, you can read the things on this slide, but for me, the take home that I want you to have is that there can be ups and downs and a lot of changes. And even, especially early on, if there are changes happening, say in the digestive tract, or you're having, uh, you're having changes in your energy levels in different ways, or you're getting some headaches, or whatever it might be, skin issues sometimes. Um, there can be a lot of changes and little signs and symptoms and things that pop up early on because there's a lot of shifts going on in the body. The digestive tract, absolutely. You're changing your diet, you're taking probiotics, you're taking CanXida remove. Like there's a lot changing in your gut and the microbial environment and everything else. There could be loose stools at first, but those things, with within reason, obviously, like things like that are just normal parts of the rebalancing of your system. So I don't worry about that too much. And there can be setbacks um, along the way, but you really should start having an improved quality of life. That's like one of the things. Like, how do you know you're getting better? Well, you've got more freedom in your life. You've got more freedom to do the things you want to do and live your life the way you want to live it. You can go on that hike now. You can not have to worry about where the bathroom is everywhere you go. You have the energy to do the things you want. You can play with your kids or grandkids without pain. You can be creative, right? All of these things, like all of that, is about what being a full and healthy human being is about. And so that all of those things and whatever that is for you as well, that freedom to do that um, should be increasing, and that improves your quality of life. And just remembering also that sometimes you just also need to just stay diligent, even though you're feeling much better. That's not the time typically to just say, "Oh, I'm good," and stop everything you're doing, right? You want to make sure that you're recovered and out of the weeds and out of the situation where the situation might relapse. And sticking on this recovery trajectory, this is just those examples I was giving of like a quick recovery, partial, and almost, and never, right? This can be different for everybody. So if somebody gets on a candida issue right when it's happening, it's not going to take 4 to 6 months. I doubt. It might take 2 or 3 months, right? But we're talking about people who have usually we're talking about people who've been having issues for over a year, right? And so I would say, yeah, 3, 4 to 6 months time frame. I mean, that's pretty quick to just have a full recovery, meaning the issue is resolved and you can just, maintain a healthy diet and not need to be doing supplementation and stuff like that. That's fairly quick for people who with a chronic illness like Candida for many years. Partial, maybe 6 to 12 months. You know, you're you're still needing to stick with it at a year, let's say, but you're close, right? And you're going to get there. Almost recovery could be like years. And that's what we're talking about. Like there just like one, maybe there's just one big obstacle in the way kind of thing. So almost recovery could be years, and then the last one is the never phase. This is the Candida clinical protocol. This is on our website and will be in the link in the description of the video. But this is the one page, but then there's a multiple pages that breaks down each phase and things more. There's a lot of videos on CanXida's YouTube page. I've talked about this a lot. I have a comprehensive, over 2 hour long webinar presentation about kind of the whole thing and understanding Candida. But you can also there's a Candida dosage webinar that we have up. And so this protocol and the information in it and the Mevi diet and all of that's all talked about in depth in different videos and things here on the CanXida YouTube page. But there's also this document that's helpful. And so these are the formulas that are part of the protocol. And so typically, if you're new here to CanXida, typically what I recommend, if you're going to really kind of do the comprehensive thing, is you do these dietary changes, starting with the Mevi diet. That's meat, eggs, vegetables, and yogurt is what that stands for. Um, and again, talked in depth in other places. And then with the dietary change, uh, putting in the CanXida formula remove, formula restore, and formula rebuild. That's going to give you the best kind of holistic approach that makes sense for almost everybody. And then again, you kind of need to work on the other aspects like stress management, for example, and things that are individual to your situation. This is from the webinar on dosage, and I'm just throwing it in here just so you have it again in another spot and can see it. This is the recommended dosages of these formulas and kind of how long. So you can see, you know, I'm saying a minimum of 3 to 6 months for the formula remove and the restore and the rebuild, right? And that is like what's in line with that quick recovery kind of timeline. So it doesn't mean that your body is not going to do well with taking these or some of these, just depending on your situation, for longer, right? Maybe it's a year, and maybe it's like pulsing up and down. You go up on formula remove for a while and back down. So again, all those things talked about, but I just want to reiterate that here, that this is kind of the recommendation based on the protocol that we've put together. And just to summarize all of this, uh, you want to have with Candida overgrowth and any chronic illness, you want to have a comprehensive approach. Remember, like it's complex. It's not a simple system. And that example I was giving, it's complex. You need to have a comprehensive approach and be as holistic as possible. The longer an illness has been there, the longer the recovery will likely be. Slow and steady wins the race, is what I like to say. Another one of my teachers has said, low and slow is like their approach with helping people heal. So you don't need to try to get the race over fast. And remember, you can't make your body heal faster than it will. You just do your best to facilitate it as wisely as possible, and be patient and gentle with yourself. I mean, um, there's a lot of mental and emotional components that can go into chronic illness, and I would encourage you to be gentle with your treatment approaches, but also be gentle with yourself. If you're having a hard time and you were doing good and then you have a patch of time where like you're starting to feel crummy again or whatever it is, just be gentle with yourself, know you are doing your best and be patient with the process. And if you have any questions, you can call or email at CanXida.com. That's the phone number there. You're welcome to email me. I just put my email down there. That's my clinic email in the bottom left. And please subscribe because CanXida has so much amazing content on this YouTube page. Free content. You can learn everything that you want about Candida and about your health, digestive system health, general health, how to live a healthy lifestyle, diet, all of those sorts of things. Okay, take care, everybody.